Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of 100 Days of DevOps. And today we're going to pick up right where we left off, which was in the previous video. In the previous video, we had an issue with the SKU, that's the size of the virtual machine that we wanted to create. So we tried two different sizes and we still got an error for them. So I've been able to get the correct size or the correct SKU. So we are going to try and deploy our virtual machine again. I remember yesterday we destroyed everything that we created. So we'll be creating everything from scratch, from the resource group to the virtual machines, the virtual network, and all. So um, I'm going to do Terraform plan, which would give us an output or give us a view of what we want to create. And after Terraform plan, then we do Terraform apply, and we see the resources being created. So we're just going to wait a sec for this before we proceed. Okay, so from our Terraform plan, we have 5 to add and 0 to change, 0 to destroy. That's because we are creating everything from scratch. Remember, we destroyed everything in the previous video, just like I said. So we're going to do Terraform apply. This time I'm going to do auto approve so that it doesn't give me a prompt. I don't really want the prompt. So we are just going to sit back and wait for our resources to be created. And once that is created, we can verify that our virtual machine, our resource group, and all other resources were created successfully. And then we can move on to the next thing for today. Okay, so our resources have been successfully created. This time around, we don't have any issues. So the size that we use is the standard D2S V3. So if you have gone through the Azure session, then you would notice that I think there was a particular video where I covered different types of or different SKUs of virtual machines. We have the B series, the D series, the E series, the F series, the H series, and all of them have different purposes. So for the D series, this series are just like general purpose virtual machines, right? So the one we tried to use before was the first one that was given to us was the F series, which I think that is for either processor optimized or compute optimized. I can't remember. Then we tried using the B series, which is like a small virtual machines for testing, but those two did not work, so I had to use the normal D2 series, which are the normal virtual machines, which are the standard SKUs. So we're going to go and check our portal now, and now we have just two resource groups. If I should refresh this, I should see three resource groups. And okay, so now we have our Terraform RG. If I should go inside our Terraform RG, I'm supposed to see my virtual machine, my NIC, my network, and disk. Remember, in the previous video, only these first two, network and network interface, virtual network and network interface were created. That's because we had issues with the virtual machine. And if the virtual machine doesn't get created, the disk will also not get created. Like the way I also explained that the way Terraform does it is that it starts creating things from the top. So wherever it gets an error, everything after that will not get created because there's already an error after that. So um now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to destroy, I'm going to do Terraform destroy, and I'm going to do auto approve. So it doesn't give, because it is supposed to also give me a prompt like we saw in the previous video. So I do Terraform destroy, auto approve, so it takes down everything. So what I really want to focus on today is, remember in the first video for Terraform, I said Terraform has a file structure where we have the provider.tf, main.tf, variables.tf, and all of that. So what I'm going to do in this particular video is we're going to create this same set of resources However, we are going to, instead of using just one main.tf, we'll have we'll break it into the proper structure, and then we'll create the same thing, but instead of using one file, we'll use a combination of different files, but it's going to be the same resources that will be created. So while the destruction process is going on, I would be creating the other files, and then we'll see how we can. I've already taken the time to break down everything, so I'll just do copy paste. But before that, let me create the necessary files. So let me do provider.tf, and I explained what provider.tf does. I'll also create variables.tf. I'll create terraform.tfvars, and lastly, I'll create outputs.tf. So now we have 5 different files that are going to help us do the same thing that one file has helped us do. So I didn't create the main.tf because obviously we still need the main.tf because that is the major file that Terraform will use to create the resources. So I'm just going to cut out for the provider.tf. I will cut out this part and I'll just do so. I'm taking this part and putting it in the provider.tf. Okay, so I'll save this. Now for the variables.tf, basically we know what variables are. Variables are things that can actually change. So you can think of things that can actually like that you shouldn't have code. Anything you shouldn't have code in your block of code can be used as a variable. So, but in variables.tf, this is not where you put the value. I explained the difference between variables.tf and terraform.tf VARs. So variables is where you define the variables you want, and tfvars is where you actually define the value. I said the variables is the form, right? Terraform.tf VARs is the value. So I'm just going to go to my notepad and out. So I've created different variables. We have variables for location. Location is a variable. Resource group name is a variable. VNet name is a variable. Cider range can be a variable also. Subnet is a variable. Subnet cider range can be a variable. You know, their VM name can also be a variable. So everything that you feel can be a variable or shouldn't be hard coded in your code, you can make them a variable. And how do you write variable? Just do variable and it brings out what variable do you want to define. You can say VM underscore name, and then you define what you want to write under the variables. So I'm just going to delete this. So you can see it already. My intelligence is already bringing out the code snippets. I'm just going to go and copy this. All the variables that have been defined, I'll copy it and I'll paste them here. So we define the number of variables, location, resource group, VNet, and blah blah blah, and all of that. So we save. Then all these variables we need to define their value. So we need to define their values also. So we'll come to let me get the values. So we define location, define resource group name, we define VNet name, CIDR range, subnet name, NIC name, and all of that. So everything that you've defined, you will see that it is practically the same thing. It's just like you're inputting the value. Like, for example, this is the location, this is the variable location, and then we have the location here. If we come back here, this is rg underscore main is a variable. From here, you can see it here. So everything that has been defined as a variable here, you will just put a value here. It's as simple as that. No No rocket science about that. However, remember now that in our main.tf, everything was hard coded, meaning the moment we start introducing variables into our structure, the main.tf, the way we write it is going to change because the places that we have coded, now we have to define them as variables. So I rewrote the main.tf. It's basically the same thing. The structure is the same thing, but the references are a bit different. So I'll copy that and I'll show us the difference. So let me just copy it from here. Okay, so just do this. So you can see that the structure is the same, but now the difference is we now have something like var dot origin. So if you want to reference a variable, you use var. Once you use var, you click on the dot. It will bring, let me see if I can, let me do var dot. So everything that has been defined in your variable, you would just reference it here. Use var dot whatever. If it is location you want, use var dot location. If it is resource group name you want, use var dot resource group name, right? So let me delete this. So you can see when I type var, you can see all the variables that are defined. So you can come here and pick. So what I deleted was resource group name. So I'll just come here and click on origin name and it's there. So that is the way you reference those variables in your main.tf. So if you go down, you will see you mostly see var.nic and blah 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 and all of that. So I need to make mention of one thing. Now some variables, most of the variables are string. The variable type, most of them are string, but you might come across some variables that are not string. Most times, your variables are most likely going to be string. So and so let me mention that. Then outputs.tf, what do you want to see? Right? What do you want to see once it has been created? Let me see. Output. So what outputs do we want to see? That's the way you get your output. So if I come here, I've defined a few things that I want as my output, but I'm just going to copy the resource group name. I want to see the resource group name. Do I want the virtual network name? Do I want the virtual network name? No, I want the VM name. Output. I want the VM name, and oh, I think I made a mistake somewhere. Okay, so I want the VM name, and the value will be this. So I want just the resource group name and the value name. So it is saying for the resource group, it is saying Azure RM resource group dot name. So if you come here, if you go up, so this is the RM resource group. This is the resource group that it is referencing, and this is the name that it is referencing. So Azure RM resource group, then this resource group name, and then you know the name. If you want the location, you can change it instead of name, use location. And then if you come to the virtual machine, so this is it, Azure RM Linux virtual machine dot VM dot VM name. So that's the way you define outputs dot variable. So outputs dot tf rather. So when I save this, like, so the description is complete. Let me come and refresh. So now we are back to two resource group. So we are going to do this again. So we have our output.tf, we have our terraform.tf VRS, we have our variables.tf, we have our provider.tf, and we have our main.tf. So we've been able to break one single block of code into 5 folders. So let's see if this is going to work. So let me do terraform format. Let's check if it's properly formatted. Let's see if we get an error. Terraform.tfvars. Let's see. Okay, so what's the issue? Let me run terraform validate to see. Okay, so our Terraform FMT is showing, is pointing to terraform.tf VRS. However, our Terraform validate is showing the configuration is valid. So let's try and run it. Let me do Terraform units. So let's try to initialize everything again from scratch. Then we can plan and then apply. So obviously to reduce the previous version because we've initialized it once. So in an ideal situation, you don't really have to initialize, but just to show the complete life cycle. That's why I'm going through Terraform FMT, Terraform validate, Terraform init before I do plan and apply. So let's do Terraform plan and see if we are going to encounter any errors. Okay, so from the Terraform plan, you see also 5 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. So that gives an indication that we are probably on the right track. So let me do Terraform apply to approve. And once this completes successfully, then I would have seen how to break one single main.tf into different files. So the reason why I started with just one main.tf is to show you that the way we always do it, we do it progressively. It's the same way we did for our CI/CD where we start small and then we begin to expand little by little. So I started from just one single file, which is the main.tf, and then I decided to show how you can use that one single file, how you can split it into different files, and then you are still going to get the same output. So that's basically how you learn. You start small from one file, and then from two, then you move to two files. You might not even do all the 5 at once. You can do maybe provider.tf and main.tf. You start, and then you can then include variables.tf. But note that the moment you include variables.tf, you have to include terraform.tf VRS because those two work hand in hand. So you can start with main.tf and then you progress, you include provider.tf, then you add variables.tf and terraform.tf variables, then you move to output. And for Terraform, it is not restricted to just this 5 naming convention. Yeah, you can name your file anyhow you want, but the major thing is let there be a main.tf and let there be a provider.tf, let there be a variables.tf, this TF and output. So you can now add any other name and then reference it in your block of code. That is the way it works. So we're just going to give this a while for it to, do its thing, and then we'll confirm once everything has been completed. All right, so we've been successfully able to create the same resources. We have the same output, but in different format. And now you notice one thing. You can see right here, we have outputs, we defined the resource group name and it showed us the resource group name. We also wanted to see the virtual machine name, that's the VM name, and it showed us the virtual machine name. Okay, so we can go to our portal and then let me refresh this and confirm that it was created. So as we can see, it was created, everything that we defined was created successfully. So I've been able to show us how to create the same resource using one file and the same resource using about different file. The approach is different, but the outcome is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and destroy the things I have created. And while I do that, I will see you on the next video. Enjoy the rest of the day. Cheers.